Sites like Ancestry.com have become popular in recent years where people can trace their genetic lineage back generations. It's fun to find out who you might have been related to, and about 30 million people have already done it. But there's also another side to it. With me now to discuss that side is Zack Smith, a legal fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Welcome, Zack.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great. So I'm one of those millions of people who have taken a DNA test from Ancestry.com is what I used, and I've uploaded the raw data to a third-party site for more results. What does the Fourth Amendment have to say about my privacy rights?
Well, whenever it's not a government agency seeking your information, typically, no warrant or that sort of thing is required. You're voluntarily turning it over. But when you combine the widespread availability of this information with other trends in the criminal justice system, like the rogue prosecutors in many cities across the nation right now, it's certainly a troubling development that this information is out there. And it's also a troubling development for our criminal justice system that many local, state, and county prosecutors are simply refusing to do their jobs and enforce the laws as they're written.
So our rights in this country, obviously, they come from God, but they were written down by man, by our founding fathers. And of course, they wrote these back centuries ago, and they are timeless truths. However, now they're, with the advent of new technology such as genetic testing, how is that starting to strain somewhat some of the rights that we have?
Well, I think we certainly want to be careful with the information that we are providing. And, our constitutional guarantees, like our Fourth Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, all of those cherished rights found in the Bill of Rights that we hold so dear are unfortunately coming under increasing attack right now, especially our First Amendment rights. And so I think it's very important that we do our best to preserve them, that we hold our government officials accountable when violations occur, and that we really remember that they are our most important protections, especially during times of crisis.
And speaking of times of crisis, this past year or so that we've seen so many riots breaking out in cities across this nation. As you were saying, rogue prosecutors are dropping charges for many of these rioters, allowing them to get right back out onto the streets and to keep doing what they're doing. And when it comes to that, a lot of the money that's being pumped into these district attorneys' races, for example, comes from George Soros and other left-leaning groups. What kind of effect is that going to have on our country, looking down through the years?
Well, unfortunately, they're promoting very dangerous policies. They, in fact, have the effect of making their communities less safe, ignoring the rights and the needs of victims of many of these crimes, and unfortunately are really usurping the role of the state legislatures, because instead of enforcing the laws that the legislatures have passed, they're really just deciding to make their own laws, their own set of rules, and enforce whatever laws they feel like. And again, that's dangerous. It usurps the role of the state legislatures, misunderstands the role of local elected DAs, and really, at the end of the day, makes all of us less safe.
And even for the prosecutors who aren't rogue prosecutors, as you say, even just, the regular ones, I feel like a lot of these riots have been used and have been weaponized by the left to put pressure onto our criminal justice system to say, hey, if you don't bring charges against people we don't like, such as cops, then we're going to burn down your city. They almost are taking cities hostage.
Well, that's absolutely right. And we've seen it night after night after night in places like Portland, Oregon, where the police officers have really been hamstrung by the political players in that city. The local rogue elected DA there is refusing to prosecute individuals involved in these riots. And so when you contrast that with places like Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis, the state legislators there, are pushing for harsher penalties for those who riot, those who harm police officers, it's really a stark contrast. And for my money, I think Governor DeSantis in Florida have the right approach here.
And is there any oversight when it comes to these rogue prosecutors? Who are they accountable to?
Well, they're really accountable to a few entities. They're elected by the constituents in their community, but they have a duty to do justice in the cases they prosecute. And at the end of the day, they are expected by those who elect them to do their jobs, not to just refrain from prosecuting broad categories of criminal defendants. and basically usurp the role of the state legislatures. And so there are mechanisms, court officials, even the state legislatures themselves, that can take steps to rein them in and, again, hold them accountable and make them do their duty.
And just looking once again, big picture, when we live in this new digital technology age, so much of our information goes through third-party groups, as we were saying with genetic testing, but also with our Google searches, for example. A lot of that information goes off to third-party groups. So when it comes down to it, where do we draw the line for overreach of big government and big corporations?
Well, I think we all as citizens certainly need to be careful with who we are giving our private information to. But remember, it's a different aspect if we're voluntarily providing that information to a private company versus if the government is using their coercive power to require us to provide it. And so I think our first line of defense is us as citizens to really act responsibly when providing our private information to other entities.
And that starts with knowing our rights. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Zach.